Today, we're getting under the hood of women's health with Ellyn, the author of the best-selling book, Flat Please, Hold the Shame, and co-creator of AskEllyn.ai. Ellyn will be getting under the hood of breast cancer. When were you first diagnosed with breast cancer?
Coming up on my 3rd year anniversary of my diagnosis. I had found a lump in January of 2022, and that took me to my doctor. She thought that it was just what they call an adenoma, which is just a cyst. But she said we're gonna do a diagnostic, and I agreed that that was a good thing to do. So found myself at the medical clinic for a mammogram, diagnostic mammogram, on March the 10th, 2022. And headed home after that, thinking nothing of it. And 2 hours later, my doctor's office was calling, saying they needed to speak with me. So I was 57 actually, I was, yeah, 50. I was a month away from my 57th birthday.
What was your journey to diagnosis like?
So I found the lump myself. I remember being in the bathtub, and I made a point of doing routine self checks. And it was almost out of the blue. Like all of a sudden, I had this really large lump under my areola, and I could almost get my fingers around it. And everything I'd read about breast cancer didn't seem to compute. And I sat on it for a couple of weeks, as we do, thinking, well, maybe it'll go away. Well, it didn't. And so I went to see my GP, and I had to kind of point her to it. She didn't feel it either at the time. And then she said, oh, it's very round and sort of soft. And she thought it wasn't what they call an adenoma, which is a cyst. And so we went ahead with the diagnostic mammogram, which is they do a 360-degree view of your breast, and then they followed up with an ultrasound. And it was, the same day the doctor's office called, said they needed to talk to me. There was a bit of a kerfluffle in that, the office stopped taking phone calls at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And so I actually didn't end up talking to my doctor until the next Monday, which was pretty stressful. And at that point, she told me that I had 3 tumors in my left breast, one of which at the time of imaging was 3.5 centimeters, which is not small. And I just remember being so shocked because I had had a clean mammogram 2 years before that. And then the next step was to see a surgeon and to have a biopsy of that lump. At this point, they were very, very confident it was cancer. There's a grading system that they use when radiologists look at imaging, and it's called BI-RADS. BI-RADS 5 is high likelihood of cancer. All 3 of my tumors were BI-RADS 5. So we knew it was cancer. The biopsy was really more to verify what type of breast cancer it was. I had to wait now a month between finding out that I had cancer and getting this biopsy, which happened 2 days before my 57th birthday. And that was a very stressful period. I think I lost 10 pounds in that time period. I was really very, very panicked. And then we did the biopsy. The surgeon at the time told me there was likely no chance I was going to be able to save my breast, that it would be a mastectomy and probably 3 months of chemo and then radiation. I remember being in absolute disbelief because I was hearing this all by myself, because it was just after COVID and we weren't allowed to bring in anybody. And I couldn't believe him at the time. It turns out, in hindsight, he was dead on, that's exactly what happened.
Can you share your initial reaction when you were first diagnosed with the breast cancer?
Yeah, fear. I remember getting this voicemail from my doctor and calling my husband, who was over visiting with a neighbor, and just saying, you need to come home. And I just knew in my gut. And he kept saying, you're overreacting. There's nothing wrong. And I just knew. And I literally ran upstairs and went into bed and put the covers over my head. And I had to wait then to talk to my doctor over the weekend. And then I had to wait another 4 weeks before I had my biopsy. And in that time period, I think I lost 10 pounds just in stress. I couldn't I couldn't function. The only thing that got me through was I watched all 6 seasons of Schitt's Creek. I mean, if I ever see Dan Levy, I'm going to hug and kiss him because he got me through that time period. It was the only thing I could do. I couldn't function. I couldn't think. I couldn't get off the floor. I was so panicked. I remember feeling like I had been punched in the gut and had all the air sucked out of my lungs at once. And I would wake up in the morning thinking, I've just awoken to a nightmare. This is the worst thing in the world that could happen to me. And I'm trying to navigate how I was feeling and then how the family was feeling. I mean, we were all in shock and traumatized and actually quite angry with each other. Like it was just, it was awful. It was awful to have to go through. And so, part of what I do now and the advocacy work I do is to try and spare other people from that.
What was the biggest challenge you faced during your treatment?
So I think the I mean, there's different phases of treatment, right? So, the first, well, it depends on the type of cancer you have. In my case, the order went, I had surgery, then I ended up in chemotherapy, and then I had radiation. And I would say that the procedure that scared me the most, believe it or not, was actually the biopsy, because that was the first step. And I had spoken to other women who had been through it. And I think it's like pregnancy. They just have to tell you like the worst possible stories in the world. And I remember one woman saying, oh, it's going to feel like, your finger was slammed in a car door. And I thought, well, I'm not going to enjoy that. And so I was terrified of the biopsy. The surgery it was my first surgery ever. And so that was intimidating to go through. And, hearing that there was no saving my breast, that I was going to have my breast amputated, and then having to make the decision, to remove my other breast as well. I mean, it just was a lot to absorb, and it's kind of the news just, went from you have cancer to, you know, you're going to need surgery to, oh, there's no saving your breast and here's what it's going to look like. It was just a lot, and it happened so fast that well, at the time it actually makes it, you feel like you're crawling, like it's not happening fast enough. I used to joke and say if the surgery didn't happen soon, I was going to take a grapefruit spoon out and like literally claw the cancer out of my breast myself. So I'd say that was probably the most emotionally fraught part of it. I was in really good health when I was diagnosed. I was, fit and exercised and continued to do so, through all of this because it was a good stress reliever. And so as a result, chemotherapy, I mean, it wasn't a cakewalk, but it actually wasn't nearly the horror show that people describe it to be, which was a bit of a pleasant surprise.
What has been your support system throughout this journey, and how did they help you?
Obviously, my family. I have two grown children. I have a daughter-in-law. I have a husband. And so, they were there at every step in their own way. I mean, the trouble is you can't completely lean on your family. I know that sounds surprising, but they're going through trauma themselves. And, as a mom, you want to protect your kids and not scare the crap out of them. And, my husband was terrified out of his mind. And so, it was hard for him as well. So, I had some really amazing women who had been through this journey. And so they were incredibly helpful, in terms of sort of giving me, advice or, sharing with me their experience or what I might expect next, or all this sort of inside, oh, by the way, this procedure looks like this or like that. And so that was super helpful. And then I had a really good friend of mine who she just knew instinctively the right things to say and do. And, there's nothing really you can say to somebody that's going through this that's going to make it better. Sometimes it's just about sitting with that person and holding their hand or making them a cup of tea and just being there. And this friend just knew what to say. She knew when we were ready to laugh about something. I remember when I, was starting to go through chemotherapy. I hadn't lost my hair yet, and I bought 5 wigs, and we had a total giggle. We all like tried the wigs on and, joked around about it. And, so, I was in that place at that point that I could do that. But yeah, it's, that's probably, when people ask me, how can I support somebody that's going through it? I'm just like, just be there for them. Just hold their hand.
How has your experience with breast cancer shifted your outlook on life?
It was World Cancer Day this week, and I posted online a picture of myself without boobs. So I no longer have breasts. I have 2 great big scars that go from, my armpits to my sternum. There's a little gap in between, which I now call my cleavage. And I have really curly hair because I had wavy hair before, and chemotherapy gave me a perm. So there's the physical changes that you go through. But I like to say, and I can't credit myself as coming up with this line, but I stole it from somebody and I use it all the time, is that a breast cancer diagnosis etches on your soul. It never leaves you. It becomes part of your story. And it not only changes you physically, but it changes you emotionally and mentally and spiritually. You are not the same person um, after a cancer diagnosis. And that's not, it sounds terrible, but I don't mourn it. I made a conscious decision that the universe had decided that this was my path and this was the new physical me, and I've embraced it. And I actually now, despite, the first few weeks of being diagnosed and just thinking it was the worst thing ever, I actually now look back with a lot of gratitude over the last 2, 3 years, that it's brought me renewed purpose. And I say I love you a lot to everybody. I joke and say, the grocery clerk at, up at the mall is probably a little weirded out. And I'm not lying. I have actually hugged out with the grocery clerk. But life is precious, and you have to also just accept. I think I've learned acceptance. I think I've learned that I can't control everything, and that I need to accept my fate. And those are really important lessons.
What advice would you give to someone who has just been diagnosed with breast cancer?
So feel free to reach out to me. I'm on Instagram, and I will talk to any woman. In fact, if you're really, really sad, we'll get on the call. We'll get on a call and talk it out. And I have built a bunch of resources. This is going to sound a little self-promotional, but I wrote a book called Flat Please, which is on Amazon. And the whole purpose of that book was just to share my story and to kind of take you through this experience with me. And I've had women who've read it in the chemo chair who said, I feel like I had a best friend sitting with me, going through it with me. And then from the book, I created AskEllyn.ai, which is the world's first AI companion. So, you can interact with the book. You can read the book if that's what you're into, but you can also go to Ask Ellyn, which is basically the book come to life, and you can ask her questions and she's there to respond. So those are things that I've created because I just felt compelled to want to give back. I never say you've got this to someone who's been diagnosed, because I don't like the line. And don't, I believe that puts an awful lot of pressure on the person that's going through it. Because I remember hearing that and thinking, I don't got this. I don't know what I'm doing. I am scared out of my mind. And so I never say that. I will say, I am here to hold your hand. And that's really all that we can hope for, is that somebody just is there, And I'll tell you that there is, as hard as this journey is, as emotionally fraught as it is, there is a tremendous community out there of people. You will meet the absolute best humans through this cancer journey. And it's going to open up and bring you new friendships and new acquaintances and new experiences that you never thought possible.
Tell me 3 things you didn't know before your breast cancer diagnosis.
Oh, Well, so I didn't know that over 85% of breast cancers are idiopathic and have no family history. And I think that's an assumption that we all have, that, if we don't have a family history, we're golden. Nothing's going to happen to us. And I did feel a little bit invincible. I will tell you, and I remember it being one of the first things out of my mouth. And it is for most women. It's like, what do you mean? I don't have family history of this. How could this possibly happen? So that was one thing. The other is that there's actually several types of breast cancer. Didn't know that either. So there's, I have estrogen, progesterone positive, her expression, which is a hormone expressive, negative breast cancer. There's like crazy lingo goes on, but there's other types of breast cancer. There's triple negative, and it's all about whether your breast cancer is hormone receptive or not hormone receptive. And those cancers are actually treated differently, which actually gives me a lot of comfort. So, it really is quite individualized. And that would be probably the other thing that I would say is that you can't really look at another person and say, that's my playbook. That is what's going to happen to me. I was consistently surprised. I mean, I wanted to know because I was a control freak and I just wanted to know what the next step was going to be. But I haven't really encountered many other women who've had exactly my experience. Like it's all very different based on your age, based on, your type of breast cancer, based on the, size of the breast, like the grade, like the, there's your, size of breast cancer, but there's also grade, which is how fast that breast cancer is actually doubling in size. And so, it's really hard to kind of have that exact playbook. So you just have to kind of let the experts be in control, as hard as that is, but they have spent their careers knowing what they're doing. And this is the time you want them driving the bus.
You chose to remain flat after mastectomy. Why? And is this a common decision?
Becoming more common. There is quite a movement around women who are saying no to breast mound reconstruction. So my journey with flat began with a conversation I had with a friend of mine who had been through breast cancer, who had had implants, who was 12 years past her diagnosis and surgery. Her breast implants were actually starting to deteriorate. So that's something that I didn't really realize. I never had implants before, but you have to change them. Like they don't last forever. So you get about a decade if you're, that's about the norm. So she was at a point where her breast cancer, been fixed, but these breast implants were starting to deteriorate and actually leaking. And so she said that she was thinking about, instead of replacing her implants, she was thinking about going flat. And that was the first time I'd heard of it. And then I started Googling, like, what is this flat thing? And I started finding all these pictures of women online who were flat, who'd had their breasts removed. And they were like posing in the woods and standing on beaches topless and in forests. And I thought, wow, is this some like weird feminist thing? I remember thinking at the time, which is like totally cool. I was fine with that, but I was like, what is this? And I remember talking to my doctor about it. And what appealed to me was really more practical reasons. This was going to be my first surgery ever. And I had spent, 2 years in lockdown right after COVID, because we were in 2022. So, we weren't that far out of this whole thing. And I just wanted to get on with my life. I didn't want to be going in and out of hospital, having surgeries. And, something that I don't think people really realize is breast reconstruction after breast cancer is not like enhancement. Like, it's not like, oh, we just go in and we swap in these implants. It's actually a 3-step surgery, even without any complications. And so just the thought of having to go through all that was just not that appealing to me. I just wanted to get on with my life. And so I was never in love with my breasts anyways. If I had had reconstruction, I probably would have gone a lot smaller. And I thought, well, if I'm going to go to an A, I might as well just go 0. And I didn't have a choice anyways. My cancer was advanced enough that I had to have a mastectomy. Um, I also, I mean, there's a lot of reasons. I also knew that I was going to have radiation. And when they do radiation on your skin gets quite fragile and brittle. And so it doesn't, you can't easily put in implants after that. There can be a lot of complications and skin necrosis where the skin dies and things. And so I knew I was in for that too. And so all of those reasons combined kind of went, you know what, I'm just going to stay flat. And I actually have no regrets. And I'll have to say, the flatty community out there, the women that have decided to go flat, that's what we call ourselves, flatties, they're a joyous bunch. Like they are like it's almost like cut my boobs off and I'm going to find my femininity. They are the most feminine, most wonderful, most self-accepting, most body accepting women I've met. So kudos to them.
Did your decision to remain flat impact how you view your femininity or even identity as a woman?
Um, so it's interesting because a lot of people have asked me that question, including doctors, because I think there's this perception and society still equates having breasts with being female and with, sexuality and being sexually attractive. And I think, some of that is informed by sort of male dominance in the healthcare industry. I think that a lot of the research that doctors refer to is probably funded by breast implant companies, have to say. So there is this general perception, and there's actually doctors out there. There's a concept called flat denial, which is where, doctors will actually flat out refuse to do this kind of surgery or, overrule the woman's decision. So that's another topic. For me, I was actually always a very self-conscious person. I've never been pretty enough or skinny enough or whatever. It just I've even from the time I was a teenager, I've just been very hard on myself, and can't say that's completely gone away. But when I lost my breast, well, when you go through cancer, everything is stripped away. Everything that you think is important to your female identity is taken from you. So you lose your breasts, you lose your hair, you lose your eyebrows, you lose your eyelashes, like all the things that, if you're a 23-year-old girl, these are the things that you just are thinking about all the time. And you find yourself like completely stripped raw, like naked like a baby. And it really makes you dig deep to realize what exactly is important and what truly makes you beautiful. And so that's been a really interesting awakening. And, by going flat, I have to say I'll be 2 years out from my surgery at the end of May this year. And I accepted myself pretty quickly. I was pretty firm in my decision. My surgeon did an absolutely beautiful job. And I remember sort of unveiling myself for the first time and thinking, wow, he did a really good job. That was second my reaction versus, oh my God, I don't have breasts anymore. And so I think I adjusted relatively quickly. Some women, everybody takes, their own time with this. But I've gotten really experimental. I mean, I was a D cup before, so, and quite cleavagey. So I couldn't, wear a lot of, I couldn't wear spaghetti straps or, things without a bra. And so now I like wear spaghetti straps and I wear backless dresses and I wear I actually seek out and wear halter necks and like show off my shoulders. And I actually wear cleavage because I don't care if people see my scars. And so like all these ladies on the Academy wards, I was always like, admiring them because they had little boobs and they could wear these big plunging necklines. I could never get away with that. I wear them now. I go out and I find them now. And so I'm a big fashion victim. I love clothes. I didn't throw, I think maybe there's 2 articles of clothing that just kind of didn't work anymore. For the most part, went through everything, continue to wear everything I was wearing before. I don't hide. I don't have a bra on. Well, I don't have a bra anymore. I don't hide the fact that I'm flat, and nobody cares. Nobody's ever looked cross-eyed at me. If they have, I don't care.
What do you wish people understood better about those living with or recovering from breast cancer?
Oh, we're not broken and we shouldn't be pitied or, you know, it used to bother me when people would, sort of say, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And I mean, that is the natural reaction. You hear, you say, tell somebody that you've got breast cancer and, they're like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." I don't know. It just always kind of grated on me. Because I don't want to be pitied. Um, there are 7 million women out there in the world who have encountered breast cancer at some point in their lives that are going on and living their lives and living fully, and they'll pass you on the street and you never know. And I think that um, people that have cancer, and this goes for not just breast cancer, but any type of cancer, that we are the most badass, resilient, tenacious people out there. Like don't mess with us. Like I always joke and say we have been jacked full of poison and irradiated, and we are just, it's like, bring it. And so it also bothers me. So back to society kind of pitying you, I think the other thing is, from a workplace perspective, is employers kind of check out with people like, it's they hear that somebody's had a cancer diagnosis, and again they sort of start with the pity, and then they send them the little box, you got this kind of thing with all the pink stuff in it if it's breast cancer. And but then they start making these assumptions about what their abilities are. They can't work anymore, they're going to go on long-term disability. They're employers have a really hard time kind of dealing with this, and the colleagues and managers and people like that don't know how to manage it, they don't have a resource plan around it. And I make the argument that, again, if I said to you, I've got a candidate who is badass, who is resilient and tenacious and self-aware and can rebound from anything, and is going to put their feet on their floor and they're just going to work through it and grind through stuff, I'd be hiring that person in a minute. And yet, all those qualities that you need to get through cancer, and they kind of go, you know what, we're going to fire you because you're broken in some way. And one and two of us are going to get cancer in our lifetime. So when it's you, how are you going to feel about it? So those are the things that I kind of want the world to know, that just because you have cancer, it's not a death sentence for most of us, and B, we're badass.
If there's one thing you could tell every woman about breast health or breast cancer, what would it be?
I would say it's really important to keep in mind that, as devastating as this is, the survival rates are really great. So, if you have a breast cancer that is caught early-ish, stage 1 or stage 2, your survival rates are, upward 90% or greater. And so, there are many, many women, there's 7 million of us out there that have been touched by breast cancer, who are out there walking around doing their life. And so it isn't a death sentence.
Share tips for women going through breast cancer.
Well, first and foremost, and I've always been a bit of a fitness nut, so I'll lecture you to say your health is vitally important. Um, I was healthy going into my diagnosis. I continued to lean into exercise and exercise throughout my experience, which was over 200 days of treatments. And that was a game changer for me. I was able to rebound from surgery within 3 weeks with my doctor's approval. I was back doing regular exercises again, which included weights and planks and all those things. And I continued to, walk and do weights through my chemotherapy and my radiation. And there's scientific evidence that shows that exercise can really offset and mitigate a lot of the side effects of all these different treatments that you're going through. And so that's really important. The second piece of advice I would suggest, well, I would recommend to any woman that's going through it is, do your homework, and knowledge is power. And it's really important that you view yourself as a partner in this, not a recipient of care, but a partner in care. And that you have a voice and you have the ability to advocate for yourself and to question. And so, don't just take what doctors say at face value. Sure, they're experts in what they do, but they don't know you and your body. And so I do think it's really important that you know, be informed and be ready to advocate at every step of the way. And third is that there is a tremendous community out there. So you don't always discover it right away. When you first are diagnosed, you really feel like you are completely alone in the world, but that's not the case. There are lots of us out there that are willing to help you from day one. And it's not a community that's necessarily all, pink butterflies and ribbons. There's just some really amazing people out there who are going to be there to hold your hand through this and afterward. And as a result, you are also going to probably extend your hand and want to help others as well.